Our first question comes from Ian Watson. I'm stepping up from 50-mile ultras to the Lakeland 100 next year. I was thinking when out running, it would be great to listen to your thoughts on how training should change, what nutrition looks like, or is it the same as a 50-mile run, weekly mileage difference, how to pace the first half and get to Dalemail feeling okay, your mindset change. I ran the GB Ultras Scotland 50 Dallery to Moffat. That day I felt as if I could have run 100 miles. It was 56 miles, but I did feel strong. And this is why I was questioning how much should I change training for next year's Lakeland 100. I've done 7 runs between 47 miles and 56 miles. Interesting to hear your views, Ian. I can't really talk about training because my training for every race is the Garmin Connect training plan. That's pretty much what that's my standard. But I would say pacing wise, actually, Neil McNichol, who's been on the podcast, he has done the Lakeland 50 and the Lakeland 100. So talking about pacing, I looked at Neil's times, 8 hours and 3 minutes to win the Lakeland 50, 21 hours and 51 minutes to come second Lakeland 100. So he's at the sharp end, and I don't imagine he had a particularly terrible second half of the Lakeland 100, but that's a 6-hour difference in just doubling the time. So you really, slow that pace down. But that's just my observations on Neil McNichol's time. Yeah, Russell, super curious. Hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, it's a funny thing that you mentioned where it is, what's the word? It's exponential, the speed drop off.
Yes.
So it's double the distance, but the cost and the metabolism and the downshift in everything just seems to be so much more for 100 miles. Yeah, obviously going through a night, everything becomes a battle of the will and the belly, really, I would say, is the main two things. A nutrition game and a mental game, just moving through the night and just being able to eat and consume calories enough to keep you going for that amount of time. It's something that you need to train. You might not be getting that training if you're just doing 50-mile stuff. So yeah, I would say looking at longer runs, practicing that stuff, maybe moving through the night in your runs and learning different foods that you can absorb, building that palate and that vocabulary to extend to things that you might not often. You can get through a 50-miler on gels if you have to. You're not going to do that on a 100-miler. You're going to need to get substantial savory foods in you. So it's things like that really would be my advice. In terms of the training, it's difficult to say because I'm not sure how much mileage you're doing in a week at the moment, but it's usually a bit more. It's normally a good rule of thumb is if you want to run 100 miles in a race, I would normally recommend that you're doing that amount in a week. But, not many people can do that. So that's me.
Yeah, I would say my group of friends who run, I probably do the most miles per week. And none of them do. Not going against what Russell's saying, I'd love to do 100 miles a week, but I think
it's fine, Gary. It's fine.
No, I think my range, and these are all Lakeland 100 finishers. I think you're probably looking at somewhere between 40 to 60 miles they are consistently doing weekly. So it is a big. It depends what your goals are. If you're racing or you want to complete, there's two different things. Trish, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I would say nutrition-wise, the key thing for a 100-miler is you've got to get some solid food in at some point. And I would have it, I would kind of practice in my plan if you haven't done that before. So what that might look like might be, for example, going out and doing, a part of the Lakeland 100 course and then having some solid food and then going back out and doing, it doesn't have to be that much, maybe go and do another hour or something like that. But that will give you an indication of how your body copes and feels after you're going to take some food in and whether or not you're going to want that food as well. Like Russell said, you could potentially risk 50-miler on gels and, just like go food. you won't get through Lakeland 100 without some kind of solid food. Like most, I mean, unless there's always exceptions to the rule, but the vast majority of people will need some solid fuel at some point. So nutrition, try and practice that. Get out, do a long run. I would say 100% if you're going to do Lakeland 100, try and get out and do long recce days in the lakes, or so you understand that kind of technical terrain, or the terrain that you're going to be going over. The ascent, obviously, as well, that you're going to be doing is a big one, and that will impact how you feel about wanting to eat as well, doing the climbs. That will be the biggest thing I would say in terms of your training. I obviously don't know what your training is at the moment, but I would definitely be doing trying to get at least one good day in the lakes in let's say every kind of 3-week period, for sure, a proper good long day out, so that you understand what that feels like and you get the chance and the opportunity to fuel appropriately as well going forward. Weekly mileage, it's different for different people. I mean, a lot of people will run on lower mileage and do well. The thing you've got to remember with mileage and people that do low mileage is that they've often banked years and years of consistent high mileage. So that's the key thing. You see on Instagram all the time now, like people smashing out whatever, and I only ran to school this week or whatever. You've got to be consistent, and that's the number one thing. Consistent with the training, consistent with the type of specific training that you're doing for the event. So maybe look at that in your plan. Are you being consistent? Are you looking at, for example, the climbs, the type of terrain, and the type of distance that you're going to be doing, making that relative to the long runs that you're actually doing? So there's a big difference between going out and doing 2 hours on the road to going out and doing 6 hours on the hills, or 4 hours, or whatever you want to do. Mindset wise, I think it's one of the biggest things on 100 miles. You've got to, I never think about the distance. I always think about staying in the moment and one step at a time and making it to each point. So focus on the checkpoints that you're going to get to. Try not to think about the mileage. It just becomes too much. Start slower, give yourself a little bit more of your candle to burn, because again, you can run out quite hard on a 50 miler. If you do that on a 100 miler, you will pay the price later on, usually around 60 or 70 mile point. So just calm down your pacing, focus on your effort. If you feel good and you're eating well, stay in that zone, stay in that place. And best of luck.
Dr. Rebecca is probably a really good person to give last bit of advice on this, because she debuted. She is a debutant at the 100-mile distance, and was probably feeling a bit like Ian this time last year when you were like, holy, what do I do? Any tips that you could give to Ian that you learned from doing yours, and perhaps maybe as well anything you might change having now done it and like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely say what I wouldn't do and what I would do differently. That he'll gain more from that than learning what I actually did do. I think certainly fueling absolutely went downhill for me after 50 miles, and that was the biggest thing. That meant the last quarter of that race was quite difficult. So I think getting that right and just, it was a reasonably hot day, and I think it just sort of ran away with me completely, not keeping on top of that. So yeah, nailing that, doing more with that in training, I think was important. I'm a low mileage runner. I do that purely to try and get to the start line in one piece, and I think my longest runs were sort of 30 miles for that race, and I didn't do that many really, really super long runs. I did lots and lots of hill stuff that I was pleased with. I did lots and lots of hiking that really paid dividends on the hills. But then I knew I was going to be sort of middle towards the back of the pack. So that was very much my strategy, was to get there in one piece and be able to complete it. That was very much my goal. But yeah, getting your nutrition right, knowing what works for you, and having lots of options. I'm not entirely sure how it's set up, how much of it you take yourself and how much is provided. All of mine I took with me, and I still got it wrong. So I think it's making sure you've got lots of options and things that you know to go to when things start to go wrong, as they will when you step up to that sort of distance for the first time. It is unknown territory. No one can train into that sort of distance. So whatever you do, at least have some things to fall back on that you know work for you.
I think the biggest thing is especially when you tow your first 100 mile, is to aim for a finish rather than anything else. And I think by going for that mindset, like if there are problems along the way, slow down, sort them out, take your time, change your socks, change your shoes, stop, get some calories in, focus always on the finish being the goal rather than anything else, any time or anything. And I think that mindset will help you as well. Because in a 50, you can get by, as everyone's alluded, on like fumes, because as soon as you're 4, 5, 6 hours in, you're starting to go towards the finish. In 100, when you're 4, 5, 6 hours in, you're just warming up. You're just jogging around the opening laps. And if something goes wrong there, you've still got a long way to go. So I think just by focusing on the finish and always taking care of your future self is the best way. And knowing that those problems will arise, keeping a cool, calm head. Nutrition is a minefield, and heat, cold, everything will play battles with you. But I think by spending time on the course, like Rebecca said, and having lots of options, and perhaps if you have got the opportunity to, if you're doing Lakeland 100, no crew, is it? But spending time at those checkpoints and thinking about your drop bag at Dalmain and having things in there, high calorie things that if things have gone wrong, you can sit and have one of those 1,000 calories, lovely boil in a bag meals. Ian, good luck. Keep us posted. Let us know.
Hopefully see you there, Ian. And you can look forward to the checkpoints. I'm not too sure about other races, but out of every race that I've done and experienced, the crew, they take ownership and they make them special for all the athletes. So
it's
really
not a bourbon. It's not a bourbon and a gummy sweet, is it? You can. Yeah,
and you could, Rebecca mentioned she's not too sure what they like at the checkpoints, but you could pretty much take all you need from a checkpoint to the next. If whatever you've got in your pack just isn't serving you well, nutrition wise, then that is not the end of the world. You can problem solve along the way.
I think one more thing as well, like the key thing with 100-mile plus distance is you've got to enjoy the journey. That's the key thing, because like a 50, you can hate it a bit, but it's short enough for it to be over. But 100 plus, you've got to enjoy the journey. So invest in the journey.
Oh, Trish, you may be thousands of miles away, so you come up with the goods every time. And invest in the journey. Let's do this.